We're back with Eric. It's Passover. We're having a good time every morning. When we first get together and see each other over coffee, we got tons of study material to cover, and we don't have much time on this memory card, so we're going to make a quick one real quick. Eric, what were you telling us about that new discovery in Israel? People should hear about this. This is pretty cool.
So here, it showed up on the internet on March 25th, 2022, that some archaeologists, it's ABR, I think it's the Association of Biblical Research.
BAR, isn't it?
ABR.
Oh, is it? I thought it was BAR. Go ahead.
Anyway, the point is, they were rooting around at Mount Ebal, and when Joshua first came into the Promised Land, after wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years, they were told, we'll look at it here, Mount Ebal set up and declare the curse, Mount Gerizim, another group set up and declare the blessing, and this was this, you might say, the preeminent consideration when you're coming into the land. There's a blessing and a curse. You know, it's like, well, why would Yahuwah do that to his people? It's like, why not just say, hey, look, I prepared the place, there's all this stuff. He says, remember, there's a curse.
Oh, sorry.
There's a curse to reckon with. Say, well, does it have to be about that? Well, remember what he told Adam in the garden. Hey, look, I prepared this whole place. There's planet Earth, the Garden of Eden. Have a great time. Have a good life. But remember, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The day you eat that fruit, you'll die. That's all there is to it. Do not. So this curse was one of the main things that Adam was told right out of the get-go, and it's one of the main things that Joshua was told to declare to the people right out of the get-go, coming into the land of Canaan. And if it's true that as of 2010, and this is 2022 or a dozen years past, beginning of the 7th millennium, beginning of the opportunity for us to come back and be the people of Yahweh, do you think that he would remind us the curse?
Still available for anybody that wants it.
Before you come into the promised millennium, the promised era, the kingdom age, as some people are liking to call these days, you better remember there's still a valid, active curse. Yeah, but what about the blessing? Well, let's look at that. So here's the thing. These archaeologists rooting around in the rubble, and apparently, from my understanding, they had a press conference just the other day, and they had a whole bunch of people there, and they said this is perhaps the greatest archaeological discovery ever, concerning not just archaeology, but specifically about the writing. So here, this writing, from my understanding, piece of folded up lead, about a ½ an inch square. They opened it up, and it's about 1.5 inches square. It's got 40 words written on it in the most ancient Hebrew script ever found. They call it Proto-Sinaitic. It's what I would call Paleo-Hebrew. They just were able to decipher what it was. They were going to disclose it last year, but the COVID thing held them back. So here they are revealing what it says. And this is what it says. Cursed, cursed, cursed. Cursed by El Yahu, Yod He Vav. You will die cursed. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, cursed, cursed. The word for curse in Hebrew is Aleph Resh Resh. Arr!
Pirate.
Like a pirate. Now, why would that be the thing found? Why would Yahuwah let to be found to say, hey, look, whoever wrote this was the earliest, before Egyptian influence and Canaanite influence.
Well, up to now, they wouldn't have been able to read it at all, would they?
It took a special computerized process that they had to, they unfolded this piece of lead, and it was scratched in, nothing visible to the eye. They had to scan it like 1,000 times with this special gizmo, and able to extract the fact that it had these letters. Okay, so it proves that writing was available 400 or 500 years before they thought. Well, the thing is, when Joshua went into the land, or Yahshua, or Yahusha, Yod-He Vav Shinayan, that's the way it's spelled, that would be Yahusha, not Joshua, not Yahshua, but Yahusha, Yod-He Vav Shinayan. That's the way it's spelled in that book after Deuteronomy. The point is, when he went into the land, that was after Moshe died, and Moshe was speaking, and I suppose wrote, the book of Deuteronomy before Joshua went into the land. In Deuteronomy, I think it's chapter 17, it says that Moshe was told to write in a scroll all the words of Yahweh. Well, then that means Moshe had the writing before even this one found from Mount Ebal, but no one's ever found it. No one's been able to prove it. But Moshe is approximately the year 1600 BC, BCE. And this would have been at least 40 years later. We talked about that on other videos, but the point is, why did he say it's all about the curse? Why would he allow this to be found now, provided to be found now? What's the big deal about the curse? Okay, look at Deuteronomy 4. Verse 23, it starts off, it's called Parashah Va'eschanan, Aleph Tav Het Nun Nun. Well, Het Nun is where you get the word for grace. Chanani is the word for daisy or coquettish or graceful. I implored Yahweh at that time, saying, this is Stone's Tanakh, my Lord Hashem Elohim. Well, it basically says, Adonai Yahweh Atah, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. Well, that's like what's happening now. I believe that he's restored his name, he's restored the regard of his ways, he's restoring his language. Well, he's going to remind us that before any of this kicks off, you better remember about the curse. Now, O Israel, this is chapter 4, listen to the decrees and ordinances that I teach you to perform, so that you may live, so that you will come and possess the land that Yahweh, the Elohim of your forefathers, gives you. You shall not add to the word I command you, nor shall you subtract from it, to observe the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim that I command you. That's verse 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy chapter 4. We look up ahead to the last couple verses of Deuteronomy 10. Yahweh your Elohim shall you fear, him shall you serve, him shall you cleave, and in his name shall you swear. He is your praise, he is your Elohim, who did for you these great and awesome things that your eyes saw. With 70 souls, these are the last 3 verses of Deuteronomy 10, with 70 souls did your ancestors descend to Egypt, and now Yahweh your Elohim has made you like the stars in heaven for abundance. First verse of chapter 11, you shall love Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall safeguard his charge, his decrees, his ordinances, and his commandments all the days. That's verse 1 of Deuteronomy 11. Now, there's this fellow who wrote this pamphlet that came in the mail, Seventh-day Adventist, and he was talking about the significance of the 10 Commandments, which is Deuteronomy 5, also Exodus 20. And he says, but all these other things that Moshe wrote is referenced in Colossians 2:14 as the handwriting of ordinances which is against us, bad laws nobody can live by, as quoted in Ezekiel 20:24. Moses wrote these things, and so that was nailed to the cross. We don't have to do it. Really? Well, then what was the curse about? When he says, do all these things, is he just talking about the 10 Commandments? Or is he saying his charge, his decrees, his ordinances, his commandments, all the days? Verse 8, Deuteronomy 11, so you shall observe the entire commandment that I command you today, so that you will be strong. You will come to possess the land which you're crossing to possess it, and so that you will prolong your days on the land that Yahweh swore to your forefathers to give them, and to their offspring, a land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 18, you shall place these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your arm, and let them be ornament between your eyes. We talked about that. Ephraim's phylactery, like the hat band with his words. Verse 19, Deuteronomy 11, you will teach them to your children, discuss them while you sit in your home, while you walk on the way, when you retire, when you arise. You will write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, in order to prolong your days and the days of your children upon the land that Yahweh has sworn to your forefathers to give them, like the days of the heaven over the earth. For if you will observe this entire commandment that I command you, to perform it, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in his ways, to cleave to him, Yahweh will drive out all the nations from before you, and you will drive out greater and mightier nations than yourselves. Every place where the sole of your foot shall tread shall be yours, from the wilderness and the Lebanon, from the river, the Euphrates River, until the western sea, that's the Mediterranean, shall be your boundary. No man will stand up against you. Yahweh your Elohim will set your terror and your fear on the entire face of the earth, where you will tread as he spoke to you. And then this says, Parashah Ra'eh, Resh Aleph Hey, which is the root of the word for fear, but also reverence, and also to make evident, to put on exhibition. Same word. Verse 26 of Deuteronomy 11. See, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. Well, he just told us what the blessing was. He says it again, verse 27. The blessing, that you hearken to the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim that I command you today. Well, he didn't say what the blessing was. He just said the blessing is, even in this Stones to Knock, I don't necessarily appreciate the English phrasing. I'm reading it in English, not going into the Hebrew words to make this point. But then verse 28, the curse, if you do not hearken to the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, and you stray from the path that I command you today, to follow Elohim Achrim, the gods of others, that you did not know. It shall be on that day that when Yahweh your Elohim brings you to the land to which you come to possess it, you shall deliver the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Well, right there, verse 29 of Deuteronomy 11, Moshe is telling the people, the day you walk into the land, say these words, remind the people, yes, there's a blessing, but there's very much so the curse. So why would Yahweh say, you're at the beginning of a new era here, you better remember that curse? So he tells us in chapter 12, these are the decrees and ordinances that you shall observe to perform in the land that Yahweh your Elohim of your forefathers has given you to possess it all the days you live on the land. Verse 2, you shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations that you're driving away worshipped their gods. On the high mountains, on the hills, under every leafy tree, you shall break apart their altars, you shall smash their pillars, and their sacred trees shall you burn in the fire, their carved images shall you cut down, and you shall obliterate their names from that place. Then in verse 4 it says, you shall not do this to Yahweh your Elohim, rather only at the place that Yahweh your Elohim will choose from among all your tribes to place his name, there you shall seek out his presence and come there, and there you shall bring your burnt offerings and feast offerings. It goes on to talk about where you're supposed to perform the ritual offerings, the ceremonial sacrifices. This happens to be the 14th day of the first month of the year, in the Aviv, the springtime, here in California. So he said, regard the Pesach offering, the same word offering, the same word for sacrifice, Zayin Bechet, is the word for feast, meal. So we're having a barbecue. It's not a sacrificial offering. It's a barbecue, a dinner, like he said. So when he says, don't have sacrifices, plus there's Yeshua's sacrifice 2,000 years ago, should we observe the Pesach meal, the week of eating unleavened bread? Why are we doing this? He said, be careful to perform all the decrees and ordinances I present before you today. This whole book of Deuteronomy, I believe, was spoken, whether it was one day, one event, one short period of time. It was Moshe's last speech before he left. As I said, this Seventh-day Adventist guy sent this brochure in the mail saying, hey, everything was nailed to the cross, because Paul said to the Colossians 2 words, handwriting of ordinances, nailed to the cross, so the only thing that matters is the 10 Commandments. That itself is a dogma, a doctrine.
It's talking
You
about
might
the
say
sin
an-
debt. It had nothing to do with what Moses wrote. It was
Well-
talking about our sin debt being nailed to the cross. Another important point, though, is what you brought out about the Adventist fellow. I didn't know the Adventists regarded the Westminster Confession of Faith, because that's when they divided it all up into the 3 sections. So they're just as Protestant as the next
What they
cult
would call
Protestant.
God's law, Moses' law, and ceremonial law? Is
Yeah, all
that
the 3.
sections?
Yeah, that was done in 1646, so they adhere to that.
So the question is, why should we bother ourselves with a Pesach dinner? Because Yahweh said so.
Yeah.
And he said, if you remember my ways and walk in my ways and do my commandments, ordinances, statutes, instructions, testimonies, there's half a dozen words that he uses all the times, then I will bless you. And if you forget my ways and absorb the ways of the gods, the idols, the false philosophies and cultural traditions of the people that I would drive out before you, you will surely be cursed. So here, just 5 days ago, through this particular group finding this archaeological specimen, he's reminding us, I told you what's going to happen if you do something. You will get cursed, you will surely die. Those are the exact words he said to Adam. Mot lemot, I believe it is in Hebrew. You will surely die. Why? I just read, I think it was maybe on the internet or some kind of news item, that in America they're teaching our school children to voice the same, you might say, ceremonial praises of the Aztec deity that the Aztecs were doing it when they would kill 40,000 people in one ritual. They'd put them up on the altar, cut their hearts out, proclaim this thing to their God. We're teaching our children that in elementary school, but we're not teaching them this. Yahweh said, if you remember, if you have in a museum, if you take your children and say, look what they did, saving the artifacts, the tokens, the ceremonial dress, write books about it. He said not to do that. That if we do that, we'll get cursed. And here we are, at the end of the 2,730-year curse for the house of Ephraim, a dozen years past. And it seems like that's all we're doing is dredging up the things that brought the curse. And in Deuteronomy 30, Deuteronomy 28, it talks about the curse. You can read that. But then in Deuteronomy 30, we've mentioned it before. It says, it will be that when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse that I have presented before you, then you will take it to your heart among the nations where Yahweh your Elohim has dispersed you. That's scattered out here. We're on the other side of the world compared to Israel. The western coast of the North American continent. Among the nations where Yahweh has dispersed you, we're in the United States. And you will return to Yahweh your Elohim and listen to his voice according to everything that I command you today, you and your children, with all your heart and all your soul. Then, see, if we do that, what is it? Do what? What are we supposed to do? Get rid of the gods of others, the foreign gods. Elohim Achrim. Get rid of the idols, get rid of the words, get rid of the ceremonies, get rid of remembering even the dates and how they did it and what they did and why they did it. Quit talking about it.
It's not just that. He says rebellion is the sin of witchcraft, but he also lumps in that rebellion is like idolatry as well. So if you're rebelling against his commands, you might as well be an idolater as well.
That word rebel, it says, the very next word here it says, verse 3, Deuteronomy 30, then Yahweh your Elohim will bring back your captivity.
Yeah.
The word captivity is spelled with the letters Shin Bet. Well, so is Shin Bet Tov. So is the word return. So is the word rebel. Captivity, return, rebel, repent, old man, one who sits, one who dwells, is all the words spelled with Shin Bet. You rebel against Yahweh, you get taken into captivity. You return from your rebellion, and he'll bring you back to the land and reverse your captivity. What we need to do is stop learning and practicing the words and rituals of the Elohim Achrim, the false gods. Well, how do you do that? By walking in his ways, returning to his commands and instructions, which is Leviticus 23. Then verse 3 of Deuteronomy 30, then Yahweh your Elohim will bring back your captivity, have mercy upon you, and what's the next thing? He will gather you in from all the peoples, to which Yahweh your Elohim has scattered you. If you're dispersed, will be at the ends of heaven, maybe at the space station or in some spaceship going to Mars. From there, Yahweh your Elohim will gather you in, and from there he will take you. Yahweh your Elohim will bring you to the land that your forefathers possessed. You shall possess it. He will do good to you and make you more numerous than your forefathers. We just read earlier where Moshe is looking and saying, look, and when Yaakov had 70 people come and meet up with Joseph in the land of Egypt, here it is, a couple hundred years later, and they've got like the stars of the sky. But now he's saying, we'll be more numerous. You read that word, it's Vav He Resh Bet Kaf. Kaf suffix means you. Vav is the prefix, and He the Resh Bet. Well, that's the root of the word rabbi, which also doesn't mean just more numerous. It means increase your regard of value, more important, more considerable, maybe more people, but it's going to be way better than it was even back then. The promise in front of us is that we'll be more significant. What's in front of us is more significant than the days of Abraham, the days of Moshe, the days of David, the days of any of these kings that we read about. We have the promise in front of us that it'll be better than it ever was. But we have to return to him with all our heart and soul, which is accomplished by walking out the Moedim, which include the Sabbath day, according to Leviticus 23. And for the fellow that wrote that brochure to make the distinction, oh, the Sabbath day, well, that's part of the Ten Commandments. But the ceremonial law, that's nailed to the cross. It never says that. Somebody made that up because they got a word in their ear that this is the way it works. So this guy that wrote this pamphlet is quoting just as much made-up stuff as all the denominations that he was criticizing. The whole pamphlet was trying to prove, I think it's like 20 pages or something, how the Ten Commandments are still valid, though the people that he was talking to were saying, no, it's nailed to the cross. And he's, no, it's not nailed to the cross. Well, neither is walking in the Moedim of Yahweh. Yahweh your Elohim, verse 6, Deuteronomy 30, Yahweh your Elohim will circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring to love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and all your soul, that you may live. And then verse 7, Yahweh your Elohim will place all these imprecations on your enemies and those who hate you, who pursued you. You shall return and listen to the voice of Yahweh and perform all his commandments I command you this day. Yahweh will make you abundant in all your handiwork, the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your animals, the fruit of your land, for good, when Yahweh will return to rejoice over you for good. That's Yahweh returns when we return, and he's rejoicing for good. It's not the end of the world. We haven't yet quite returned. He hasn't returned his blessing and his favor upon us. It's not the end of the world. It's 2022.
Well, it's
but
like,
when we return, it'll certainly be the end of the world for our enemies.
like Fred was boiling it down. He's not too concerned with the cult denominations right now. He's just looking for a faithful bride. I think Fred nailed it.
What is Yahuwah looking for right now?
That's another video. We should do that.
When Yahweh will return to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your forefathers, when you listen to the voice of Yahweh, your Elohim, to observe his commandments and his decrees that are written in this book of the Torah, Deuteronomy, when you shall return to Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and all your soul. The point is, we're still getting misinterpretations from very well-meaning and very scholarly authors. The only way to return to Yahweh with all your heart and all your soul is to read his words and then walk out his ways, doing what he said. And it's not about, yeah, but you can't work your way to heaven. It's not about working your way to heaven. It's about doing what Yahweh said so that we don't catch the curse here and now. Yeah, there's a curse, burn in hell, but it's not about that. Yeah, there's a blessing, go to heaven when you die, but it's not about that. It's about do what he said, because that's what he asked us to do. He said, walk in my ways, observe my commandments, my testimonies, my ordinances, my statutes, my laws. There's a list. We've gone through that before. We could do it again. But he said, when you walk in my ways with all your heart and all your soul, then I will return to rejoice over you for good and make it better than the days of David, better than the days of Abraham, better than the days of Moshe. It'll be better than the world has ever seen. And that's what's in front of us. And here he allows us to find this little piece of lead that's so obscured it takes special computerized technology to read it, and it says, cursed, 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 cursed by El Yahweh, you will surely die unless you regard to walk in his ways. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're talking about, trying to remind each other to take these matters so seriously with all your heart and all your soul, and the promise is real and valid and solid, and his word is trustworthy. We got to do this. We can do this. It's not too hard. It's not beyond us.
Yeah, instead of like the cults where they're looking at a commandment and trying to do away with it or chop it up and into 3 different sections and say, well, these 10 apply, so well, 9 actually, forget that Sabbath thing. We look at the commandments and think, how can we apply these things? What is there a deeper meaning here? What can we do? What else can we do? What else can we draw out of that? That's quite a contrast.
We're not having lamb for dinner because it's a grief. We're having lamb for dinner because he asked us to. And really, he gave us something to do? Boy, hey, I could do that for... He just said, will you please have unleavened bread for a week? Will you please eat bitter herbs? Will you please tell my story? Tell the story of your ancestors, what I did for them coming out of the land. And by the way, when I bring you out of where I've scattered you and bring you back to the land this next time, whoo, boy, that's going to be a story. And you won't even remember the last time. It's going to be quite something. And we're looking forward to it with wonderful expectation, hope, rejoicing. We're right at the edge of the greatest time the world has ever seen. And meanwhile, at the same time, there's other voices saying, oh, we're going to break it all. We're going to ruin it all. We're going to kill everything, and we're going to change the money system. We're going to change the economy. We're going to change the ownership of houses.
That means we're getting closer.
Those guys' voices got nothing to do with anything. But Yahweh, Zephaniah chapter 3, he says, at the time that I restore a pure language, that same time, look at Zephaniah 3, verse 8, I'm going to line those guys up and knock them down because he's going to give it all back to his people. We're right at the edge of the most wonderful time. Walk in his ways. with all your
Hallelujah.
heart and all your soul. Not with fear and intrepidation, but with regard, resh aleph, hey, that kind of fear of reverence to see his promise on exhibition.
Okay.
Pesach Sameach.
Hey, you made it 30 minutes. That's really good, Eric. We did it. All right, till next time. Shalom.
Shalom.